Good morning and welcome to Frank's School. This is the 6th year, 90th day, first video. And my subject is Werdz 2 and plus. The second time that I'm showing the words that I got out of the jail. And plus is the women's class. So I can put them both, I think, into one video here. And it's settling down. I'm beginning to kind of get a plan. Well, let me go through this maybe first, and then I'll say about this other stuff. So I went into the men, and we got started late, as usual. I mean, it might have been 10 minutes late, and there's only 45 minutes. But, you know, it's all right. I'm saying to myself, I just got to stay calm. And I said, I'd like to begin every time this way, with someone, with three people, ideally bringing words to the group. But I hadn't made that clear last week, last week, and so and they had not realized that, so it was kind of blank, and I said, well, does anyone have? I sort of thought that might happen, and I was ready to get the words from the women's class, but I wanted to get one more, and so finally one man said, well, I have a word, charisma, and I thought, oh, okay, that's a good word, charisma. Do you have the context? And he said, well, I don't know. I know what the word means. He said now, so I could say someone has charisma. I said, okay, good, we got it. Someone has charisma. We got that. We looked, figured out it was naming something and how to stress it, charisma. They're catching on to that the three syllables, the second one stressed. And what does it mean? And the one man who so desperately wants a dictionary, I just automatically hand him my dictionary, and he, boom, into it he goes. He doesn't have his dictionary yet. But anyway, and he found it, and he was ready to read everything that it had there. A dictionary's got several meanings, but I had to stop him. I said, wait, that's enough because time's short. We'll just call it a special ability, not to learn, to lead. I got that wrong. A special ability to lead. I said, good. And someone could be charismatic if you wanted to use it as an adjective. And I said to him, where did you run into that word? And there came a story. A story which I'm not going to tell because I don't like to name names in this situation. But what a story. He blew us away with the way he came up with the word charisma. And so the source put down a little one, or I had them. And then at the footnote, and you're catching on to this too, footnote. The footnote was going to be, where did he get it? From the mother of charisma. And that's, I think, all I'll say about that story. Well, since we didn't have any more words there, I just, the treatment specialist was there, and she had been in the other class, and she had her notes, and so she gave me the words, and I had them too, but it was quicker, that we'd gotten last week from the women's, avaricious and ardent. And if you want to see the information about that, just go back to Werdz 1 plus, and you can see that we got it. So we got the context and all that. Footnote, where did we get it? Well, we got it from the women's class. That one, avaricious. And then this one, we got it from the same source. So once again, I was able to use ibid to introduce the concept of ibid. It came from the same source. And I think I hadn't done that with the men yet. And the one man, he lit right up because he remembered that from when he was my 8th grade student. He said, oh yeah, I remember that from your class, ibid. So I was able to teach that. Now, when I went, and the sentence that we came up with then was, the ardent man was so charismatic that he didn't need to be avaricious. After discussing what putting this word in a sentence and this word in a sentence and this one, and then we put two and all three. It was hard because there wasn't a lot of time, and these are kind of big words, but we came up with that. The ardent man was so charismatic that he didn't need to be avaricious. Kind of a cool sentence. And I've started to date it. I said, let's always do that from now on. I should have started earlier. Let's give a date automatically, and this is the way we'll start our class. When I went over to the women's class, the same sort of thing happened. They had no word because they didn't know. I mean, they could have, but I hadn't told them. So we used the men's word, charismatic, and it was from the men's class. The charismatic preacher was, and what I did was I used the two words from the men's class, ambiguous and iniquity, because I had them readily available, and the treatment specialist had her notes. And we came up with the sentence, the charismatic preacher was ambiguous about the iniquity of his flock. Parishioners, I think, was the word that the woman used, but I just changed it to flock because it would be quicker. And I said, do you understand what I mean? Yeah, they understood it. All right, so that was the main event, the initial event. That was Werdz. But then I had time to teach, and I'm always hoping for that, teach for a little bit more. I had told them I found that there's an organization, Books Through Bars, in Philadelphia. I might be able to get them good books. But it turns out the treatment specialist said that somehow they weren't qualified, maybe because they were a jail, not a prison. Maybe later I'll say more about that. So I'm back to that dilemma, which I'll solve, of getting good books into their hands. That book, story poems, the women said, what happened to it? He showed it to us, where did it go? And the learning specialist wasn't sure. She said, I put that in, was for the women's class, and best guess was it was just dumped at the back of this closet where their men's library is, because the women would have, they were looking forward to it. So there's a search to find that. I think they'll find it. Hoyle's rules for card games, I had given that to the men last week, yes. But I had another copy of it, and so I gave that to the women. And one of the women said, boy, that'll be useful in pinochle, because apparently the women play cards too, and they must play a lot of pinochle, and there's arguments about what are the rules. So that'll be useful for that. I actually carried that out of the jail and realized I hadn't left it behind. I was allowed to. So I went back in and put it in a box so that it would get to those women. And I also told them about bridge. I said there is a card game called Contract Bridge, which is more prestigious among rich people anyway than other, well, I shouldn't say rich, but more prestigious about a certain social set than other card games. And if you learned it, a bridge game needs 4 people, and they're always looking for a 4th. And you could say, yeah, I play bridge. What? You play? Yeah, I play bridge. They could learn it. Robert's Rules of Order. I took a copy of that in. I didn't think I'd be able to leave it there. I didn't even realize they would want it. But when the men saw that, said, hey, could I look at that? I said, you know, this isn't a court of law. This is how you run a meeting. Call a meeting to order, secretary, all that stuff. They were interested. So I ended up leaving that behind. I think it's assigned to the men's library because they were more interested than women, but the women were too. And I have a plan here. I had taken in 3 old, beat up, well, not too beat up, but very old, worthless copies. A copy of Mutiny on the Bounty, and then the trilogy, Men Against the Sea and Pitcairn's Island, because I thought, you know, if they've got nothing to read. The guy who asked me what should he read, and I'd come up with Swiss Family Robinson. I thought, well, here, read that. I read them as a kid, and I really liked them and all. And I also made an appeal for them to read the classics. I didn't write that down there. But with both, you might say I made an ardent speech, impassioned speech about how it is worth it to read classics as opposed to just fun books or good books or, at the moment, popular books. Classics are worth it. And I tried to explain why. You read a classic, and millions of other people have read that classic for a long time. Plus, it's valued still. It might be 100 years old, but people still value it. Then it must have been good. And I made that speech. All right, now, notes from Mr. A. Here, I took the cover off, and I left, I had wanted to leave a copy of that with both the men and the women, and I was able to do so. I put a clean piece of paper on it. I had to take the inside, and I had to take the cover. I didn't have to, but there were names on it. So I left that, and that is basically a list of classics. And the the treatment specialist said that she could photocopy it, had to take the staples out. Kids can't have staples. So she had to keep it until she'd take the staples out. And Anyway, she said she'd make a few more copies of it so they could have it. I suggested that they might want to just, if they had enough paper, copy that list out. I always have to keep in mind that I may lose or I will lose these students. They're going to go on either out or on. So that I did. Now Friar Lawrence, I've got him here because in the I think it was the last week, a guy gave this strange little mini performance at a certain spot, and I pegged him in my mind as somebody who likes to perform. And I asked him, "Can you memorize?" And apparently, he already has a reputation for being able to memorize as a bit of an artist within the block. Anyway, I had a plan. I said, if you can memorize, how about memorizing Friar Lawrence's first speech in Romeo and Juliet, where he first enters? And I'd taken it in and I dog-eared the page where it was. That's the cover. At first it looked like I couldn't leave it there because it had been mutilated. The cover was gone. And I said, well, I took the cover off because there's a woman, Olivia Hussey, who at one point people thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Teenage girl, you know, and I don't know if that's going to do any good to be circulating in there, so I just took the cover off to cause no problem. Plus there's dye. And it almost looked like I wasn't going to be able to leave the book, but then one of the inmates said, no wait, we got lots of books that don't have covers. And so I was able to get it in there. She was going to photocopy the speech, but I really was hoping the whole book would get there, because if that went well, there's a lot of other wonderful stuff to be read in Romeo and Juliet. So I was able to get a copy of Romeo and Juliet into the jail. I showed about bookbinding, and I've got my mind made up about this. I took this book in, which I had bound myself. It was made up of several signatures. There would be one signature. These were duels that a friend of mine and I used to do. And I showed how you can stitch them together, and even suggested that if you don't have staples, you just put 2 holes, and you could maybe use dental floss, something available to make that stitching. And they wouldn't be allowed to do that because they'd be using a material for something the material was not intended for. There's so many rules to learn there. And I also showed them this book, which was the same sort of a thing, a collection of stuff that has been done in my class, that a volunteer in my class, a woman that didn't have any other useful thing I could do, she actually bound it the way I showed you and put a cover on it with a hinge and a spine, and did a pretty good job. That's going to be useful because I've now got a plan about what I'm going to be doing with what they write. All right, let's see. Bookbinding. So I told about bookbinding, and I'm going a little bit fast here, but I'm doing 2 videos sort of in one, which I'll sort of try to do in the first place. This stuff was for both Werdz and Werdz Plus, and here was the main thing. I guess that'll be enough for today. Bye for now.